Welcome, I'm Shannon Siriano Greenwood here at Hardywood Park Craft Brewery with Eric McKay and Patrick Murtaugh. Well, you guys, thanks so much for having me here. I met you in 2011 when you were literally just starting, and you were at that time going restaurant to restaurant, basically introducing yourself, Hardywood, to Richmond to try to get your beer on tap. Yes?
We were.
Does that seem like 10 million years ago?
In some ways it seems like yesterday, in other ways, yeah, it does seem like 10 million
years ago.
Yeah.
So for me, that was the beginning, and that was the first I heard of you, but I know that's not how things usually start. So can you tell me how you got started and what phase of the process that actually was when you were actually finally out in the world telling people what you're doing?
Sure.
Yeah.
So for us, I'd say that was probably 8 or so years after we decided, let's start a brewery, and decided, let's homebrew beer, learn how to actually make beer, and then let's start learning about the business side of things, and worked in distribution for many years, and wrote a business plan. And at the time that we opened, it wasn't legal for breweries in Virginia to sell beer at a tap room. You couldn't really have a tap room, and so that wasn't part of our business plan. We just wanted to work with local restaurants, and that made it a lot more expensive to start a brewery. You had to have some economies of scale, you had to have some larger equipment, and we stretched our dollars as far as we could. We were able to finally get some investment dollars together after business school and brewing school, and opened our doors. And it was this sort of extremely exciting moment of, we finally get to sell our beer,
yes!
But also a scary moment because we knew we were going to be, we have to sell our beer, and also we knew we were going to be losing money for that first, extended period of time. That's just the nature of the business for a manufacturing business. And I think for us, the turning point was when it became legal to sell beer at a tap room, and that was when we were able to really start investing in people, investing in quality, investing in innovation, and that's really been the catalyst for us getting to where we are today. Richmond now has a beer scene. Richmond is attracting people from all over the country for special beer releases, for beer-related events, and that's doing a lot to not only help drive tourism dollars to the Richmond area, but also it's increased the awareness and the credibility of Richmond beer specifically, and I think that's doing a lot to help local retailers to sell more local beer. It's really just,
Well, it's definitely been a cultural shift, I would say.
For sure.
Yeah.
In the last 5 years, probably across the country, but definitely you can feel it here.
Yeah, Richmond used to be a cheap beer town where
Right.
people would go out, they'd buy cheap beer, and when they're interested in spending a little bit more on beer, that helps retailers, that helps restaurants, that helps, again, the hotel business industry as well.
Yeah, I think it's really created this culture of beer tourism that you saw in other cities like Denver, more mature beer cities, and Seattle and Portland. And, Asheville, North Carolina is a good example of a place where people travel to. It's this kind of beer mecca in a way, and I think Richmond's becoming that now.
And locals feel a greater sense of pride of their hometown, and ultimately.
I see Hardywood stickers on lots of cars in this town, all over
That's
the place.
Pat. He's sticking them on.
Is that what you're doing in your spare time? Well, let's talk a little bit about the beer, because I do remember, and maybe this is not a correct observation, but I remember the gingerbread stout kind of getting this national recognition, and that kind of being a big catalyst to okay, it's not just that they're the cool new brewery, they actually make really amazing beer. Was that something that you felt put this place on the map nationally, or was there anything else that happened that kind of got this name beyond Richmond and beyond Virginia?
Gingerbread stout certainly helped.
That was a big part of it. Yeah, it was kind of a back-to-back. We sent it into Beer Advocate magazine. We got a 100 rating, which is, I think, the 7th time in the magazine's history that they'd ever given a 100 rating to a beer. And
you guys were still so new at that
we
time.
were so new, and also there had never been a gingerbread stout brewed commercially. So for us, when we came up with the idea, we decided, let's look and see what other gingerbread stouts there are out there to see if there's a certain way we should shape this recipe. And so for us, it was a completely new concept. We were using all local ingredients, local honey and local ginger, and doing our best to make the recipe come together. And I think that was really Patrick's recipe. Brian, our head brewer, had some input on the recipe, and we brought the recipe together in a way that I think just worked perfectly with what we were trying to accomplish, which is what the magazine recognized, and then what really sort of opened the international interest in Hardywood, or knowledge for interest, was a few months later getting a bronze medal at the World Beer Cup, which is the largest beer competition in the world, with 100 other beers entered in that category. That was for us kind of this reassurance that this beer, which at the time I think it was about 5 months old, was probably a little bit past its prime, and getting a bronze medal in this international, the largest international beer competition, was just, saying something that we're doing interesting things. And
it was that first big competition we actually attended as brewers, and so that was pretty thrilling. Yeah, to see our name come up on the screen and walk up and accept our award. And so that was pretty thrilling.
That's incredible. Well, I know events play a big role in what generates the excitement as far as driving traffic to this location, and probably to Charlottesville, I would think, as well. And something that was new to me is this idea of like a beer release, right? And so you have done that very successfully. How important is releasing special products, and how do you think that through as far as strategy when you're thinking about what you're going to make through the year?
Well, we've always done all of our bigger releases at the brewery, and we've always found that that's translated into bigger sales out in the market at stores and restaurants. So yeah, that wasn't initially part of our game plan. Initially, again, we weren't allowed to sell glasses of beer in our tap room, but since we've been able to, it's been great in getting people out, getting people excited, and our first couple releases didn't go all that smoothly. We didn't know how many people would show up.
A lot.
For a release of a beer.
I know, because I've been here.
yeah. Gingerbread stout the following year after the first time
madness.
Was that first sort of crazy lines, and again, it wasn't something we fully expected.
Sure, it was still fun.
Yeah,
even in the madness.
But from a looking at, when we have a bigger release at the brewery, there is a 100% correlation between a successful release at the brewery and building interest, and then success in the market, beer selling well at local restaurants, local stores. So
interesting. I just thought you guys threw a good party.
We try. We have a good hospitality team that's becoming a well-oiled machine.
Like, do you still get that nervous? Like, oh my gosh, what if nobody likes this and nobody comes?
A new beer, absolutely.
Every single time.
Every single time.
We get nervous. It's not as much on the table. In that first year, it was like everything was on the table. If we only had 2 beers available, and if one of those new beers we were releasing, people responded unfavorably to, that could be really really harmful.
So it's not as intense.
It's not as detrimental to our business, but
you still
you
feel
want
it.
everyone to like your beer. Those are your babies. That's what you're putting out. That's representative of us, and so you want people to like the beer.
Well, I always like to ask people that question, because I do think there's this assumption once you reach a certain level of success, like, you're not scared of stuff anymore, and like every decision just seems like supernatural, and there's never that fear. But it seems like everything you guys have done has totally like been knocked out of the park. Was there anything or any opportunities that you've started to explore that just didn't work out?
Yeah, sure.
Plenty.
Would you share some of those, and kind of just what lessons you learned from those mistakes or missteps?
Well, yeah, I mean, one early on was a beer that we brewed with strawberries that was part of our reserve series. We wanted to focus on using local ingredients, and so we ordered 2,000 pounds of strawberries, which is what we calculated we'd need to brew 40 barrels worth of strawberry beer. And we were very fortunate in that through social media, a lot of folks showed up to help us to de-stem and slice these 2,000 pounds of strawberries, which was way more than we expected. We only had about 4 or 5 employees at the time. And for 2 days we cut strawberries, added them to the beer. The beer was tasting fantastic. About 2 or 3 weeks later, we started to see posts on social media of phenolic off flavors, and we're like, what is, this beer, everyone loved it at the release, and so we tested it internally, and a couple team members who were more sensitive to this specific type of phenol picked it up, and we acknowledged that this is a beer that has gone bad, and so we, anyone who brought beer back in, we compensated them for it, and it was hard to do that. But I think that was a wake-up call and a realization that we need to start investing heavily in quality assurance. And so we did. We hired who we think is one of the top quality assurance in the beer industry people on the East Coast, Kate Lee, who worked for 12 years for Anheuser-Busch, ran quality assurance labs for them. And since then, it's been pretty smooth sailing on the quality assurance side, but it didn't deter us from then making a blackberry beer. We learned our lesson. We pasteurized the blackberries the second go round. While there's nothing that can, pathogenic that can survive in beer, there are certainly bacteria that you can't taste that might affect the flavor of the beer down the road.
Gotcha.
And so we now take precaution to prevent beer from going bad. We also have equipment that can detect bacterial contamination that gives us a heads up long before we package and release beer that could potentially go bad in weeks or months down the road.
So yeah, nothing has been flawless, but I think we've done a.
Well, you recoup well, right? You learn from those mistakes quickly.
You always learn from mistakes, and I think we're usually, every misstep we make, I think we're a stronger company because of that misstep and how we've worked to change things and move forward. And, there have definitely been some events early on, and we weren't experienced at running events, and so they didn't always go smoothly. Some had longer lines. We didn't have the right setup, and I think now we've learned a lot from those lessons, and I think we have a lot of really talented people in place that have helped us develop how we run events.
Well, I'm sure that makes all the difference too. I mean, you mentioned it when you were talking about the strawberry beer, you had 4 employees at the time. I think there's a few more than that working with you now. Well, do you have, and in closing, any advice for people that are just in the starting phase of their business, of, something that like you would tell yourself 8 years ago or however many years ago when you were starting, that would give you the confidence to get to where you are now?
Mine would be to take your time, learn voraciously, get experience. And we wrote our first business plan in 2006, and had we started then, we probably would have failed. And I think it was, being forced to continue working in the industry and learning and gaining experiences that are invaluable to us today, that we've been able to make some of the more difficult challenges that have enabled us to keep on going.
I think that's probably the best. Yeah, absolutely.
It's good, because a lot of people are in a rush, right? You think you need to have it all figured out right now.
You need to get that experience under your belt. And, it's tempting to just, get it going. And again, if we had the money, we might have made that mistake of just starting up and not being nearly as prepared. So.
A lot of people will come and look around and say, this looks really cool, I want to do this, without having any idea of all the incredible pitfalls and challenges that are behind the scenes.
Well, I think that is absolutely common. You compare someone else's 10 years into your starting and thinking that you need to be exactly where someone else is. It's put in a significant amount of work to get there.
Sure.
So. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for chatting with me today,
Shannon.
sharing your insight, and I am very excited to see what is next for Hardywood.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.